For some people in the area that's treated, the fat grows and hardens and lodges in your body. And so some people, instead of having less fat, they now had more fat, and it was like hard as a rock. And there were some where it was like big masses in their abdomen that had to actually, then you have to go in and you have to have surgery to remove it.
Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drugs, and Products.
Welcome.
Very excited. Just got back from Vegas this most recent weekend. It's Wednesday today that we're recording. Got back Saturday. Barely just finished recovering. Thank God we had a few days.
I was fine. I'm just going to say I didn't require that much recovering. But then again, I was also the one who was back in the room at like 9:30 or 10 or maybe 11 on a couple of occasions.
Definitely a little bit more responsible than me for sure. But let's get into just Vegas overall, because this is our second MTMP. We went last year. We kind of covered what exactly MTMP was last time. But I don't know if you want to start just going over kind of how Vegas was for you.
It's Mass Torts Made Perfect, and it's a gathering of attorneys from across the country who are involved in various mass tort projects, and we all get together twice a year, every April and every October. And it's a great opportunity to get updated on the cases that maybe you're not personally involved in, and just learn about what the new cases are on the horizon, what you might want to get involved in, what people might want to know about. And it's pretty much, everybody who's in the know is there. It's a place to be, and be seen for sure. That's Vegas.
Yeah, it seems like pretty much. Well, it gives you a good idea of almost a roadmap for the upcoming year about what cases to keep an eye out for, and even old cases like you mentioned, and updates on those.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, definitely cases that we've been working on. I mean, I was in a hernia mesh meeting, and we've been working on those cases for over 5 years. So, yeah, just, again, catching up, meeting with people, kind of planning, strategizing, all of that. Yeah. And having some fun as well, because, it's in Vegas.
I was about to say, I mean, that's my favorite part about these conventions. And I think it's no coincidence that so many different areas of business have their conventions in Vegas. I know when we were there was the unions, like unions from all across the country were coming and meeting there. Some guy I was talking to at the table, there was a sign convention, like neon signs.
Oh, well, that makes sense signs. In Vegas.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't even realize that was a massive market, but I guess, they had a big convention out there as well. But the best part, I mean, is that there's business. You get a lot of work done, but you also have the ability to kind of enjoy yourself. And the event hosts events, or hosts kind of like
entertainment. Parties and comedian. I'm just going to say that as far as getting a lot of work done, some of us might have done a little less work than others. I'm not pointing fingers or anything. But
no need to call me out. It's a little messed up. It's okay. It's okay.
But you got to schmooze with people. You learned a lot. But if it was an early morning, Ben was probably not there. So.
Yeah, early mornings aren't my best, but I did go through the hall and I talked to everyone and got a good idea of all the different types of businesses that were there. A lot of lead organizations that, sell leads and whatnot. But, I was really sad I missed the mimosa bar. That sounded fantastic.
Well, don't worry. They have it every time. It's mimosas and Bloody Marys. And
last time we were there, I remember they rented out Omnia at Caesar's Palace, which if anyone hasn't been to Caesar Palace, I mean, Omnia is like the center main club in there, their big club. It is massive. I mean, absolutely huge. And they rent out the entire thing for a few hours, open bar. And they did the same thing this time, but it was
at Excess.
Excess, yeah.
Yeah, Club Excess, which is in the Wynn. Well, kind of between the Wynn and the
Encore.
Encore, yes, between the Wynn and the Encore.
Yeah, and that was a fantastic time. I mean, we had Fernie out there. He was getting some good videos. We'll definitely post some teasers there. Yeah. But, I mean, everyone was just jamming out on the dance floor. I mean, it was open bar, so everyone was definitely vibing, feeling themselves a little bit.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, and it was great. And as Ben said, we got to have Fernando, who is kind of our behind-the-scenes guy, does all of the video. He'll be editing this for any mess-ups and bloopers we might have. But, so he got to come out and actually meet us in person for the first time. We've been working remotely this whole time, and that was kind of exciting. He actually does exist in real life.
Yeah, man's an absolute dog. I mean, I was hitting the tables with him, and he was getting a little bit better luck than me, but he knows what he's doing. It was nice having kind of guiding arm there.
Yeah. It was good times for sure.
Well, we might as well just hop right into it as well with just interesting cases, interesting updates, news.
Sure. So interesting cases in the news. There's some kind of juicy things this week, and a couple of things involving like cosmetic surgery procedures, which seems apropos coming home from Las Vegas, kind of the land of the showgirls and legal prostitution. I don't know. Perfect bodies. There's, if you're going to see them, that's for the place.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the first one, and this is really interesting, a big story came out in the New York Times, and it involves the CoolSculpting procedure. And I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's, how have you missed this? But,
CoolSculpting? Well, I'm not really in the industry of...
Well, so the thing is, there's billboards everywhere. It's just this huge procedure. And basically what it is it's a device that you put this device on problem areas on your body, and it basically freezes your fat cells. Yeah. And so you see it's sounding familiar now, right?
It is.
Yeah, so the process is and they're in dermatologist offices, med spas, as well as plastic surgery offices, but it's not surgery. And so it's super appealing because it's, basically they say no downtime, and you can, melt away, freeze and then melt away your fat. So what supposedly happens is this device is applied, and it freezes the fat. And then over the course of the next few weeks, the fat cells break down, die, get absorbed into your body, and you're supposed to be able to spot reduce. And so huge popular product. But guess what? There's problems, or we wouldn't be talking about it, right?
Sounds a little too good to be true.
It sounds too good to be true. And, the problem, again, is that the companies promote it as, low risk or no risk. Well, it's not terribly inexpensive. I think it averages about $3,200. Yeah, it's about $3,200 for the procedure, which it's less than surgeries. But basically, it's you come in, spend your. I actually think they promoted it as doing it at fat loss on your lunch hour.
I love that.
Right.
Yeah, just have like a Big Mac and freeze off the calories.
Yeah.
Easy peasy.
So, it just got crazy, and people, are like buying these machines. I think it made, was it like over $2 billion so far?
Insane.
Yeah. Big deal. Obviously something that a lot of people, it's going to appeal to a lot of people. The problem is that, yes, there's a risk, and it was really downplayed at the beginning. But what the risk is, and it's a big nasty thing, it's called PAH, or paradoxical adipose hyperplasia.
That's a mouthful.
It is, but it's nasty. Basically what it is that for some people in the area that's treated, the fat grows and hardens and lodges in your body. And so some people, instead of having less fat, they now had more fat, and it was like hard as a rock. And there were some where it was like big masses in their abdomen that had to actually, then you have to go in and you have to have surgery to remove it. And it's basically deformity. It's very traumatic. And here are these people going in trying to think they're going to look better, and they come out looking significantly worse.
Yeah, and especially in kind of the beauty field product area, this entire area, right? You're kind of preying on people's insecurities. People are coming to these places already, maybe not feeling great about themselves, about their body, whatever it may be, and looking for, a remedy. And when you offer a quick fix like this, that seems like it has no downside. Doing it in a lunch break, right, where you can just kind of go and get it done and go straight back to work, that sounds incredibly appealing to a ton of people.
Yeah, and that's why they've made so much money. Problem is, again, when they first came out, they were saying that the risk, they were aware of this potential problem. Mm-hmm. They were initially saying the risk was about 1 in 20,000. As time went on, there were some problems actually with people realizing that this was related, because again, you have the procedure and then you're not even expected to see good results for several weeks. And so then these bad results would come up weeks or months later, and people wouldn't know that it was related. They thought, well, maybe I've gained back weight. Sometimes it was obvious if it was like a big rock-like substance, that sort of thing. But so there were not a lot of reports. People didn't understand that the issues that they were having were necessarily related. I think the reason for the big story and what really brought this to light was Linda Evangelista, who was a big supermodel in the 80s and 90s. She had this procedure done. and I think it was in 2021. At least she came out and talked about it and filed a lawsuit in 2021. And she had the procedure done on various parts of her body, and she had this horrible reaction. And I mean, literally, she said that she became a recluse. She would not leave her home.
Wow.
I mean, here's this woman who, was absolutely, one of the top beauties in the country, in the world, probably. And now, not only has she not improved these little areas where she wanted to lose some fat, but I mean, there actually was a whole story in People a few months back, and she showed some pictures with her clothes on. But I mean, it was crazy. And this was after multiple surgeries, and she could afford to have all these surgeries to try to improve it. So when she came out, all of a sudden the complaints started flooding in because people were like, oh my God, that's what happened to me too. That's a result of that. And so the complaints, I think they went from right following Linda Evangelista coming out about this whole situation. That year, there were 1,100 adverse event reports, more than they'd had in the entire 10 years before.
Wow.
And then last year, there was more than 1,900. So people are figuring this out. And the doctors who are performing the procedure, of course, they know also that there might be this small risk. But they started coming forward and saying, wait a minute. I'm in this relatively small practice, and I'm having multiple patients that have this PAH. It's not 1 in 20,000. And in fact, in 2017, a group of doctors came out and said that they believed it was 1 in 100.
Oh my God. And that was in 2017. And you mentioned that she filed the lawsuit in 2021.
Right.
So this has been out for a little bit. And unfortunately, this is kind of what happens is that once one person, especially, whether it's an individual or a law firm comes out and says like, oh, this is an issue, then all of a sudden there's a flood of people that also had this issue, but just didn't make that connection.
Right. And it's a little bit different too, because, people have some kind of a little bit of an issue about it. They're like, oh, I went in. First of all, when people have plastic surgery, how many times do they not tell anybody? They want it to be a big secret, right?
Yeah.
And so this is, again, one of those things where it's even easier to keep it as a secret because you can do it on your lunch hour. It's not like you're going to miss work for a week or 2 weeks or something to recuperate. So I think that there's a little bit of shame involved in it also. And then feeling like, oh, was I being too vain? Did I somehow deserve this? And, kind of hesitancy. Another reason that there were not a lot of complaints is that when people did have problems and they would contact the company, and the company that owns it now is Allergan Aesthetics, which is part of AbbVie. When they would contact the company would oftentimes say, well, we're really sorry this happened. And yes, it is a rare occurrence, and we're willing to pay for your surgeries to have to have these corrective surgeries. However, you got to sign a confidentiality agreement. You can't tell anybody.
Wow.
Right. And so people can't afford to do the surgeries unless they have the company pay for it. And now they have to keep their mouths shut.
And then, and how does that play out when, a case comes out and it says like, you can't actually pursue money? If they sign that document, does that mean they can't pursue it down the line?
Yeah. If they've signed a settlement agreement. And so basically they presumably settled for whatever the amount was. Yeah, that's it. They're done. They're through. But they also are not reporting that they've had these problems. Yeah. And so these numbers are staying super low that anybody knows about when really they're significantly higher.
And what makes it even worse too is the model that you mentioned. She had the money for the surgery and she was getting these surgeries, but it wasn't completely fixing the issue. So even these individuals that can't afford it and they have to reach out to the company itself and have them pay for the surgeries, thinking, this is going to fix my problems. Okay, I can't talk about it, but it will fix my problems. They go and get the surgeries and it still doesn't?
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't. And even if there's an improvement, they can remove this, these fat clumps at this point and masses. First of all, now you've had an invasive surgery, which you were trying to avoid in the first place.
Yeah.
You've got scarring, and then you have whatever the risks are to undergo that corrective surgery. Mm-hmm. So, you go, this started as being a quick thing, low risk, lunch hour, I'm going to look better. And all of a sudden, years later, you're tens of thousands of dollars in. You've had surgeries, you're permanently scarred. Again, even if the masses are removed, you've got scarring from the surgery to get in there and remove them. So, it's really been a nightmare for a lot of people. And I think it'll be really interesting also now that this New York Times story came out and then the People story, how many more people are going to come forward. Mm-hmm. And hopefully people will be more cognizant of the actual risks if they're going to go in and consider this procedure. Mm-hmm. It's great to lose a little bit of fat, but this wasn't for huge. This wasn't like this was like spot reduction, and it was a quick fix. But it's in my opinion, not worth it.
And what I wonder about as well is that once this information starts coming out, once these articles start coming out, and you even mentioned kind of the doctors, the ones that are in a smaller practice, and they knew it was a rare occurrence, but then they start seeing several of their patients coming with these issues. Do you think there's going to be a reduction in, doctors willing to use it? Is it, at what point is it kind of on the doctors once that information comes out to stop offering it?
Well, I think I think it's ultimately not on the doctors if they are completely honest and open and give and explain the actual risks.
Yeah.
Now, the issue with some of the doctors have said absolutely they don't use it anymore.
Yeah.
That's it. I don't want to deal with this. They're having to deal with these patients. And oftentimes, like with the plastic surgery kind of practice, these are repeat customers. They're going to come back and get things as stuff keeps falling and sagging and all that kind of stuff. But they have to then come back, deal with the patient who's just devastated and distraught. And that's not good business for them either. So there's some that absolutely have stopped using the product, but it's still out there. And they're taking the position that it still is a relatively rare occurrence. Mm-hmm. What they're currently saying is 1 in 3,000. So the company went from initially 1 in 20,000 down to 1 in 10,000. Now they're kind of copping to 1 in 3,000.
Yeah.
But what are the real numbers? Like I said, that one group of doctors came out and they said it looked like 1 in 100. And I think that these numbers are going to change up also as there's more publicity out there and people come forward more. Yeah. And one of the other things that I thought was interesting, in fact, when I was talking to my husband Peter about this, who's a doctor, and he's always questioning, this study, this number, this blah, blah, blah. He was talking about, how they got to those numbers. And the reason that they can say 1 in 3,000 is they actually base it on the number of procedures sold, not the number of procedures performed. And that's important because they sell them in packages. So it's not a one-time thing. And so if somebody buys 6 procedures and has one of them, then the numbers are, it's one, it's down to,
yeah.
I'm not a mathematician, but anyway, it skews the numbers significantly.
Yeah. And it sounds like they're just getting closer and closer to this 1 in 100. And something that you mentioned as well is that a lot of these doctors that are performing this have the repeat customers, which seems like, if something like this is so likely, and if it does happen, that is the complete opposite of what, you're going to that doctor for.
Yeah.
I'd imagine them to start cutting down on offering this service.
Yeah. Or being really, really clear about the risks and making sure that the people understand that. And again, as always, within any of these cases, if you know what the risk is, you can choose to accept a super high risk if you want to, but you got to know. If the risk is dramatically, if it's 1 in 100 and they've told you it's 1 in 20,000, that's not fair. Mm-hmm. You didn't make. That was not a fair opportunity for you to weigh the risks and benefits of the procedure and decide if you want to accept the risk.
Yeah, and it's so scary too because, even if you hear 1 in 20,000 and someone that might be pessimistic might say, okay, maybe they're just being really generous. Maybe it's more like 1 in 10,000. But then when realistically, even now they're saying it's 1 in 3,000 and that's with the numbers kind of skewed a little bit.
Yeah.
That is insane, the difference.
I never trust the numbers that they're giving, honestly. But, I'm a little jaded in this business.
Peter would probably disagree with that one.
We argue a lot, but and I'm constantly having to show him the studies and that sort of thing. Which again, we're providing that information as well here because I understand that people can be skeptical. Some of these things just sound so outrageous and so crazy.
Yeah.
And in fact, the information we're talking about now was just in this past weekend's New York Times. So that's a pretty trustworthy publication. And of course, they cited studies also.
Yeah. And it's always good to kind of do, your own research on your own time if you're ever curious. But I know that Fernie's been throwing in some links to resources for anyone that might be curious about learning more about the stuff that we discuss on here. And speaking of that, I think I've been getting a lot of people reaching out to me saying that they've checked out the podcast and they've been enjoying it. And it's been great to hear, one thing that really stood out to me was someone reached out and was like, yeah, after I watched your episode, I went and researched all my medications and made sure it had that 7-year rule. It's been out on the market for 7 years, and that's when you can kind of feel at least a little bit more comfortable about the risks associated.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, it's great. And again, really what we want to do is, put some of this information out there. A lot of these things, they come out and it's in the news and it's very brief and people don't hear about it and they just don't know about it. And I think so many people really do trust the drug companies and think that they're all in it for the good. And while there's part of that, it's, again, we've talked about, it's a money-making business and it's a huge business.
And I can't blame them. I mean, I would trust it. And same thing kind of goes with the doctors, too. They don't know any better. They're just going off what they're being told and the studies that they're being shown, even if they're being cherry-picked. Yeah. And it's just definitely a scary idea to feel like there's people you can trust, but it doesn't seem to always work out.
Yeah, yeah. So, so Linda Evangelista filed suit. There are some other cases against the makers of CoolSculpting. So that's a product that we normally talk about. The other thing in the news, or the next thing in the news that I want to talk about, because it's been all over the place and it's just one of those attention-grabbing things, is Brazilian butt lifts.
Nice. Big fan of those. Big fan.
Oh, you're not going to be a big fan in a few minutes. Just give me some time, buddy. You are not going to be a big fan of these things. And so this is not a product per se. It's going to be a medical procedure. Again, another cosmetic medical procedure. So it would be a medical malpractice case potentially, and that kind of falls within the purview of personal injury. That's a category in there as well. So we do also look at medical malpractice cases. Anyway, these are what's come out, why it's hit the news, is that all of a sudden this is like the deadliest cosmetic procedure ever in the history of cosmetic procedures.
Really?
Right? And it doesn't sound like it would be, does it?
No, I mean, someone comes in and they just want a nice dump truck. I mean, how can that be lethal in any way? If anything, they should be applauded for that.
All right. Well,
too much.
No, well, so it sounds like when you hear about the procedure, it doesn't sound as terrible and as invasive as some procedures. I mean, with the whole facelift thing, I mean, they're cutting and moving things, and it sounds, it's pretty significant. What they're doing here is it's a liposuction where they're taking fat out of the abdomen, the flanks, other areas, and they're then taking your own fat and injecting it into your buttocks, so that you get like a badunkadunk. So is it thick is the saying or something?
Yeah, 2 C's.
Yeah, exactly. So, and this procedure has gotten super popular in the last 20 years. I mean, it used to be everybody wanted like skinny little asses.
Yeah, and then Kim K came in and said, "Hey, this is what you guys are missing out on."
She did. And I don't know, what's the debate? Is hers real, or do we even know?
The entire Kardashian family, argues that they're all natural, but you look at older photos, it's pretty clear that's not the case. And even with, them saying, "Oh, I work out," I think there's a clip out there of them, working out, and it is nothing that would give them the attributes that they have, for sure.
Well, I mean, I know I've worked out with trainers over the years. I mean, I've done so many squats, it's ridiculous. And there's nothing's happening back there.
You mean you can't throw 30 pounds on your ass by doing squats? Come on, that's reasonable.
No, but I'm sure as heck not going to go for the BBL. I can tell you that. So this has gotten super popular, and it's apparently the procedures have increased more than 800%.
Wow.
I mean, people really want some butt. They want some back. Where's it? Baby's got back. Or, I don't. There's the old songs.
There's a lot of them.
A lot of them. Okay, we could go pretty bad with this. Anyway, so there was about 7,400 in 2011, up to 61,400 in 2021.
Jeez.
So this is like super popular. I mean, honestly, I don't know anybody who's had a butt lift. Do you?
No. I mean, not around my age group, at least.
Yeah. So the hot spot for these really is South Florida. And people are flocking down there for these things. And it's become this just huge business. And so they have these like super high volume, low cost clinics. And they have these doctors who are doing like 11 in a day.
Pumping them out.
Popping them out for
pumping them out.
Yeah. So it's just crazy. And so what's happening, the reason, I guess I've kind of gotten ahead of myself. I'm on a rant here. But the reason that it's so super dangerous, because again, it doesn't sound like it's that dangerous. You're just taking fat from one part of your body and you're putting it into another part of your body.
Yeah.
So it seems like, the way that they would describe it, it doesn't sound terrible. So the problem with this is that you can have what's called a PFE, and that's a pulmonary fat embolism. So when they're re-injecting that fat back into the buttocks, it can get into your blood vessels, and you can block your pulmonary vessels, which can lead to respiratory failure and even death.
Jeez.
Yeah, and so people are dying. I mean, literally, people are dying from this. And sometimes within a few hours of the procedure, and people have traveled from all over the country, and they're dying shortly afterwards, or sometimes even on the operating table, they're dying.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, this gets in, blocks, you're done. So it's super, super dangerous. And there's been quite a furor about this in South Florida. And there was actually an emergency rule that came out in 2022 saying, for the Florida Medical Board, saying that the doctors could only perform no more than 3 per day, and they wanted them to use ultrasound. Because the issue with this is it's what they call a blind procedure. It's not like an open procedure, so they can't see. They're sticking this cannula underneath the skin.
I was going to ask, I mean, you mentioned that they just take the fat from one area of the body and put it into the butt, but is it literally they just kind of just pick a random spot, jam it in there, and start injecting?
Well, I mean, it's not random. I mean, they're obviously wanting to go for a certain look in the butt, so they're trying to, sculpt. But the problem is if they go too deep, if they stay really surface, then it's just the subcutaneous fat, and that's not the dangerous part. But when they get further and into like the muscle area, that's where you can run into this problem.
I see.
And so one of the issues was they were trying to tell the physicians, to how to use the cannula to use it on a slant rather than directly down, so it wouldn't go as deep, to use the ultrasound, and just make sure that you're staying, on the surface. But when you have a doctor who's now doing 11 of these in a day, they apparently take around 2.5 hours. Oh. Yeah. I mean, it's just like conveyor belt of, butt lifts, coming through. And
it's shocking to hear, too, that, you said there was an emergency rule. Who made this rule? Is it?
So that was actually the Florida Medical Board.
Okay.
Yeah. There was enough issues. And then they had sent this out to all of the plastic surgeons, some, things that they should do to minimize the risk. And then they came out with the actual rule. They're trying to pass a permanent rule limiting to 5 a day.
Yeah.
This was just a very temporary kind of emergency regulation because people, were dying. And from a cosmetic procedure, again, I mean, there are risks that you take when you're going to, save your life or really enhance the quality of your life. But to have your butt thicker, people don't think they're going to die. I mean, that's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, especially with kind of like the odds that it's sounding like that they're dying at, or at least the chances. What's even scarier, too, is that the board is having to come in and kind of explain to these surgeons how to do their business, how to do what they do every single day that they've been spending tens of hours of, every day doing. And then all of a sudden they do this emergency rule, but they already have, these consistent clientele or these people coming up, set up, I'm sure, months out in advance for 11 a day. I mean, having that rule come out and then having to readjust all of that while also having an incredibly packed schedule sounds incredibly difficult, if just not unrealistic.
Yeah, just crazy. I mean, it's just asking, just courting disaster, I think. And so a lot of the doctors that were interviewed recently were saying that they just won't even do the procedure anymore. It's just not worth it. And I think the actual rate, the mortality rate, was somewhere between 1 in 2,300 and 1 in 6,200. Again, for a cosmetic procedure, that's really high.
Yeah.
And in comparison, so a breast surgery is 1 in 72,000.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, you can get boobs and you're not going to die.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Well,
decide where you put it.
For the viewers, if there's anyone that's still on the fence about it.
Boobs or butt.
Yeah.
I'm saying the safer one are the boobs. But of course, it would be ideal if we would just be happy with our bodies and live a healthy lifestyle. But I'm not
ideal. But you can't judge people for wanting to, if they feel better or feel more comfortable in their body. If they want to do that, then they should. What sucks is that no one would imagine the risks being that high. With any type of surgery or any type of procedure, I think there's always kind of that concern, that fear. But especially with something that's so minimally invasive like this, you would assume they would be very minimal.
Exactly. And I mean, I always say, we all get to choose how much risk we want to take and what we want to take it for, right? But I mean, we need honesty. We need to really understand. We need to have the information so that we can make an educated decision.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we go over all the interesting cases.
Okay, all of them. All right,
yeah.
So you want to move off of the butts?
Yeah, I mean, as much fun as I've had going over them. I know we got a few different topics to go through as well.
All right. Well, just one more in the news. And this was actually one that you brought to my attention. And I think shout out to Christina for seeing a sign in not Whole Foods, in Trader Joe's. Yes. And so, and actually, it was interesting because I had heard about this. So this involves a recall of frozen strawberries. And I had heard about this. It actually came out in February. But there was an update just a couple of weeks ago on this actual recall. And this involves frozen strawberries that were produced in Baja California, Mexico, and that they were used in a variety of brands of either frozen strawberries or tropical mix, that sort of thing. We talked about this a little bit because you were asking me, hey, what about food recalls? And I was saying, honestly, in most cases, they're relatively minor injuries or damages. Sometimes people get a little bit sick, but we don't see a lot where it's a really bad problem. And this one actually is. So it's the strawberries have been infected with hepatitis A. They are clear that it did come from them. It's a very specific strain. And Hep A is scary stuff. I mean, It can be deadly and it can be a permanent condition. So it's, if you haven't heard about this, check your freezers. They should be off the shelves at this point, but the products are sold at Costco, Aldi, Trader Joe's, Vital Choice Seafood, which was like, why am I selling strawberries at a seafood place? Okay. And PCC Community Markets and a place called Kihi, which I have not heard of. Anyway, so they were sold in these places. And the actual products, and we'll put up a graphic on this, I think, but they're Simply Nature Organic Strawberries, Vital Choice Organic Strawberries, Kirkland Signature Organic Strawberries. Again, those are the Costco ones.
Yeah.
Made with, as the brand, Organic Strawberries, and PCC Community Markets Organic Strawberries, and then Trader Joe's Organic Tropical Fruit Blend.
Yeah, and like you said, I found out about this through Christina because she saw the sign at Trader Joe's, but I had no idea that it was also in the Kirkland brand because, I know a lot of my friends have Costco memberships, and when you go to Costco, a lot of the cheapest, best options are Kirkland brand.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people use these for smoothies. So they're trying to be healthy. And again, it's a product that you get, and I know when I buy frozen stuff, I buy a whole bunch of it, and it's in there for a long time, and might be, a year later, I'm like, holy shit, I need to throw this stuff out. It doesn't look so good anymore. So it's really important to, go and take a look and make sure you don't have these things. And as far as the actual condition, hepatitis A, it's a really nasty virus and it causes liver inflammation. But it's contagious. It can be spread from person to person. So if you get this, it could actually affect other family members, friends, people you come into contact with. And it is very serious. You usually get symptoms within 15 to 50 days of consuming the product. And again, it's one of those things where you have this delay, people get sick, and I don't remember what they ate when.
Yeah, even if you get it the next day, you're not going to think it has anything to do with the frozen strawberries or the smoothie that you had the day before.
Yeah. If it's really close in time, maybe you're going to look at all the foods you ate, but you really have to look further back. Some of the symptoms to look for are fatigue, nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, jaundice, dark urine, pale stool. But you can also be asymptomatic, and particularly with young children, like under 6 years old. So if you find that you did have this product and that you believe you consumed it, you should actually go and see your medical care provider, even if you don't have symptoms. It's possible that you have been infected and you're asymptomatic. And the other reason you really want to see a care provider right away is that there's actually a post-exposure treatment that you can get if you get it within 15 days that can help prevent you getting the disease.
And is that 15 days from showing symptoms or?
Well, from being exposed. Oh. And so the exposure would be when you consumed it. Yeah. So if you, this comes up not strawberry scenarios, but where somebody knows they've been exposed by another human being and they know when that was, then they can go to their doctor and say, here's a time frame. And if it's within the 15 days, it's called post-exposure prophylaxis. And it's basically a vaccine. And there actually is a vaccine some people may have already had that would protect against Hep A. But if you haven't had that vaccine, vaccine, again, there is this post-exposure treatment that you can have. But again, it's like a time thing. Like everything we talk about is like, do this right away. Check your fridge, check your freezer, see what you've got in there. And if you have a package that's open and you think you ate some of these, check it out. Even if you're not sick, you might have been exposed.
And I'm not very familiar with hepatitis and kind of the details around it. I know there's hepatitis A and hepatitis B, but also how are people able to infect others? I mean, my immediate assumption was it was a blood disease,
Yeah, no, just close contact.
So it can be sneezing.
Yeah, close contact on this, yeah.
That's crazy. And it's just, I mean, you have a smoothie and then you go out, I mean, anywhere, right? Even if you go out to a
kiss
club.
somebody and the next thing you know. Yeah. I mean, so they actually found out about it because there were these outbreaks and they were like, what the heck? And finally, and it's always crazy, like, how do they ever figure this out? Like how they take it back to frozen strawberries. Yeah. And I don't know the answer on this particular one, but, they did find out that it was a very particular strain. And so they're confident that's the case. There have been some more cases since February. And so, they are still warning about this. If you do find the product, obviously you can throw it away or you can return it to the store for a refund. And you can contact the FDA if you want to, if you have been affected.
And I was going to ask, I mean, for victims of situations like this, I know that generally there will kind of be a large settlement and then you can kind of send in like either a receipt or proof that you had, had the product or experienced the issues with it and then kind of get a small payment. Is this different? Because it seems like it's much more severe than, misbranding or mismarketing.
Yeah. So actually it's what you're thinking of as a class action and there actually isn't a class action. Mm-hmm. So that would be a case where it's actually certified by a court. But so there isn't a class action on this. Presumably the people who have been infected and can establish that either have or could pursue an individual lawsuit. And again, it's a significant enough injury that it probably is worth pursuing. Mm-hmm. Again, sometimes, we've seen things where people get, they have some GI issues for 24 hours or so. That's not worth like a huge lawsuit, and usually the companies will compensate, but sometimes it's hard to establish, exactly that connection. With this, it's going to be pretty clear cut. If you have this strain of Hep A and you purchase these strawberries, the liability and that's pretty much taken care of. Then it's just what are your damages, and hopefully you had a brief illness and you've recovered, but you could have really, could lead to liver failure and death. So there could be some really, really, really bad injuries.
And is there a recall going on? And what does this mean for the farm in Baja California, Mexico, that we're sending these out throughout the country and putting them in products? Are they shut down? Is there investigation going on?
Probably. The answer is probably. It's in Mexico.
Yeah, so that's what I was wondering, is because I feel like it's a little bit more of a sticky situation.
Well, and I don't know exactly how they handle those things in Mexico, but I know that there are certain agreements that if you're going to ship your product into the U.S., you have to abide by certain standards. So I think that they're probably, I know the FDA is involved, and I don't know how far back that reaches to the actual producers.
Yeah, that's terrifying. Again, just trying to be healthy, having a smoothie and having something as crazy like that happen. And especially if you're asymptomatic and, you kind of have this small time frame to really go and hopefully receive treatment.
Yeah. So anyway, good catch, Christina. I guess they still have the signs up, and again, it's really good that the stores are doing that, because if you didn't see this when it was like a little blip in the news, but then you're at Trader Joe's and maybe you'll remember, oh yeah, hey, I think I do have those strawberries.
And I'm a massive Trader Joe's fan. They have, especially their frozen meals or frozen products are just top tier. Their pork belly, 10 out of 10, highly recommend, especially for ramen.
Okay.
But
a good shout out to Trader Joe's.
Big shout out. Maybe a sponsorship incoming. We'll see.
You never know.
Updates on cases. I know that we've been going over a lot in the recent weeks. Has there been any big updates on any of them?
There's always updates. One thing that I thought would be good to kind of touch on as part of the update, because a lot of people listen to our show on the Tylenol autism connection. A lot of comments, questions, and it's a hot topic and a sensitive topic for sure. So we actually had a comment about the show, and a gentleman pointed out that the diagnostic tools these days are so much better for autism, and there's just more knowledge about it, and that perhaps that had to do with the increased rates of diagnosis. And absolutely, I mean, this is a multifactorial situation, and there are a lot of other things that can cause or contribute to autism as well. So not everybody who has been diagnosed with autism and can show that they were exposed in vitro, they're not all necessarily great cases that we can relate to that. And one of the things that we talked about a bit at Mass Torts Made Perfect was this, and the factors that you look to whether or not you have a strong case. So what are the factors that would say this is a strong relationship, or what are the ones that say that it's not so strong, or that there may be other causes? And so for example, some factors that would indicate that you would not want to bring this case: complications during pregnancy or birth, a child delivered by C-section as a result of birth complications, preterm birth, so 36 weeks and earlier. This is a big one: alcohol, illicit drugs, or tobacco use while pregnant. Obviously, those things are very significant. Yes, the Tylenol has effects, but these things have effects has some pretty significant effects as well. Also, certain prescription drugs while pregnant, SSRIs, anti-epileptic drugs, any opioids, those could contribute. And then really important, a family history. I mean, if you have a family history of autism, ADHD, it's going to be really tough to say that it's not hereditary, it's not related to your family history, it's actually related to the Tylenol. Advanced maternal or paternal age. And then there's certain genetic mutations that can make that more likely: Fragile X syndrome, Down syndrome, those sorts of things. So I think it's a good point. We're not saying that, there's huge increases all related to Tylenol, but there's a lot of synchronicity with that it certainly is a good indication that it may cause or contribute in a number of cases. And that might or might not be the situation for you or your loved one.
Yeah. And I was the one that actually caught that comment, and it was good to see, because I think it's awesome to see that people are listening to the podcast and kind of thinking about it on their own and coming to their own conclusions, because I think it's always good to second guess, as much as we'd like to say, trust us, right?
Trust a lawyer.
Same thing with the pharma companies, trust us, it's always good to do your own research and kind of double check things. But I think you bring up a great point that, we're not saying that Tylenol causes all of autism.
Absolutely not.
Just that, there are obviously other factors that can contribute to it, but there does seem to be a link and a correlation between it.
Yeah, and so that litigation is moving along quite quickly, actually, and so we'll keep you updated on that as it goes along. But yeah, I mean, actually, please, if you have questions, comments, or just like, what the hell, I don't believe this, you could say that too. I mean, that's okay. We're happy to provide additional information, studies, whatever it is that we have available to us. We're happy to share.
Yeah, most definitely. And especially going to these conferences, like you mentioned, I mean, there's a lot of information that comes up, and kind of just get overall updates on, how many cases are coming in and how fast it's going as well.
Yeah.
Moving on, though, we got cases that we are currently handling.
Okay. Well, we're handling a lot of cases.
We are.
But today's topic are hip, knee, and ankle replacements, specifically ones that are manufactured by a company called ExactTech. And over the years, I've handled a lot of hip and knee cases, not so much ankles. But this is an actual recall case. The initial recall was in 2021, and the company recalled approximately 200,000 devices. And a lot of times with these joints, the issue is the design of the joint. Like we talked a lot about the metal on metal, where there was little shavings of metal coming off.
Yeah.
And this is actually, they're indicating a packaging problem, defective packaging. And so when they manufacture all of these joints and they ship them out to all of the hospitals and surgeons, they are packaged and they're supposed to have a pretty good shelf life. In fact, they say that they should have a shelf life of 8 years. So you can stock up on these things and keep them on your shelf. The problem is that the vacuum bags were missing this secondary barrier layer, which provides oxygen resistance. So because it wasn't sealed properly, kind of in a nutshell, they were able to get oxidized. And so this is very problematic. You wouldn't know it when you implant them, but what it happens is that they don't last as long. They start breaking down, and they can cause fluid retention in the area. You can end up with infections and bone loss. I mean, it's really nasty. Yeah. And really, when you start having the symptoms and the problems, the damage is done. Mm-hmm. You're not hurting until there's problems with your tissue and bones. And so then it requires undergoing a revision surgery. And if anybody's had a joint replacement, it's hell to recuperate from.
I was going to say, I mean, out of any type of surgical procedure, a joint replacement is the most like terrifying to me. I mean, one of the most invasive, right? Like I can imagine, getting in the muscles, throwing stuff in there, but when it's the joint, I mean, completely taking it out and replacing it, I mean, that is just, it makes me, shake a little bit, shiver. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it gives me that feeling too. But at the same time, I mean, I've seen so many people who've had just these miraculous results where they literally get their life back. I mean, they couldn't walk, they couldn't be active. And I mean, it's one of like the greatest accomplishments in surgeries, in recent times, I think. I mean, it's amazing when it works well. It's just great. The problem is, if you get a bad one and you have to take it out, and now you're dealing with not healthy tissue and bones. Sometimes you actually have bone loss, and so that second surgery is usually much, much worse.
Yeah.
And really, these things are supposed to last for a really long time. I mean, hips they're saying should last 15 years or more. Knees 20 years or more. So when you get this, you're not thinking you're going back in 3, 4, 5 years.
Well, and I'm assuming a lot of the people that are getting this too are probably, older individuals that, I don't know what bad to say, but aren't necessarily super concerned about 15 or 20 years in the future.
All right, wait a minute. Now, I'm an older adult. Now, I'm concerned about 15 or 20 years. But actually, what you would be surprised is that there are a lot of younger people because there are a lot of sports injuries.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. That's massive.
Yeah. A lot of sports injuries. So it's not always necessarily older people.
Yeah.
And again, if you're 25 and getting one, I mean, you're going to have a second one in all likelihood. But 20 years, again, that's a long ways down the road. And when we're talking about looking at the risks, here's what the deal is. You didn't sign up for a deal for 5 years.
Well, and like you mentioned as well, in 20 years, once you do the replacement, it should be, not a pleasant experience, but there's not going to be, immense damage in that area compared to when there's a malfunction in the device where there's issues already. So putting in the second one's not going to just be just a easy switch. There's more problems associated.
Yeah, no, really bad ones. I mean, it's just some of the things I've seen over the years with the DePuy and the Stryker. I mean, horrible issues, where people, then they get infections. There were some death cases. I mean, you can become septic. Amputations where they could not replace the joint.
Jeez. And so what happens on recall situations like this? I mean, I know earlier you mentioned, I think, an air fryer recall where you
slightly different.
Yeah, right. Like you just cut the cord and you turn it in. But compared to this, where even if you're not having issues, if you know that you've had this type of joint implemented into your body, do you just, even with no issues, you have to go back and just have that surgery again?
Well, not necessarily. So the recommendation is that if you know that you have this type of implant, you want to go and you want to talk to your surgeon, and they can do some testing to see if it looks like there's damage up front. So you wouldn't want to just necessarily go in and take it out, but you would also want to catch any kind of problematic changes earlier rather than later, before the real significant damage is done. So it's important to know if you have it, and to talk to your physician about what type of testing, preventative testing they want to do. And one thing I just kind of wanted to pitch in here is that a lot of people are like, I'm not really sure what I have. I mean, they might know ExactTech, but they wouldn't know which exact product because, of course, they have different models. And oftentimes, I had people come in and say, "Oh, well, I have the Stryker card, and here's what it says." Because when you get a joint replacement, oftentimes you're given this little card to use at the airport. It's because there's metal in your body.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. And so when you go through security, they're going to see that. And so people will hand the card to them at security. But the doctors oftentimes just give them any old card because they're like, it doesn't really matter. TSA guy doesn't need to know which model you have.
Yeah.
They just need this. So those aren't always accurate. The best thing really to do is you can ask your surgeon. They will have the specific information. There were recall letters that went out to patients, but they did not go out to everybody. And then there's also issues about people move and this and that. And somehow I just had so many back in the striker days. I mean, recall letters had to go out to everybody. And I can't tell you how many of my patients or my clients, the doctor's patients, said they never received that letter. They did not know.
And I mean, going off of, knowing what type of joint replacement brand you have, I mean, that's not like a new car where you're driving around saying, oh, look, I got a Mercedes Benz. You're not walking around saying, yeah, I got an ExactTech in here.
Well, even with the Mercedes Benz, I mean, is it like an E300? Is it a M class? Is all of these things? And it's the same thing here with ExactTech. There's a bunch of different ones. I mean, AccuMatch, MCS, Novation, Novation Constrained. I mean, there's all of these different terms.
And with this product specifically, and I know with recalls, it'll kind of be like any product that was sent out or sold after this date. Is that this type of situation, or is it just all of this specific ExactTech model?
So it involves devices that were manufactured anywhere between 2004 and 2021.
Oh, but
it's a lot. Yeah,
that is a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone that probably got it before that probably already had it replaced at this point.
No, maybe. So they're saying they're estimating approximately 200,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, if you think that you might have had one of these, it's a really good idea to get in touch with your physician. Hopefully you'll be somebody who does not need to have it replaced, but unfortunately, it doesn't look good if you have one of these actual recall devices. And these cases, they have been around for a while. They actually are consolidated into a multi-district litigation since October of last year. That's in New York. And so these cases are proceeding along. If you do have one of these implants, if you want to participate in the case and be compensated, it is very important to reach out to an attorney sooner rather than later. Again, the timeframes on these, sometimes they will, depending on the state, it could be from the date of the surgery, but in many states, it's from the date that you knew or should have known the problem. It could be from the date of the recall letter, or it could be from the date of the symptoms. And again, it varies. So it's really critical that if you think you have this thing, even if you're not having symptoms, it's best to reach out, and get some more information.
Yeah, and it sucks that, I mean, I just know it's the way it goes, but it sucks that there's so many different kind of things that play into how long the case, I don't know if case goes, but how long you can kind of claim damages.
The statute of limitations, the limit on the time before, the time within which you have to bring the claim.
Yeah.
And it's super complicated, but I mean, I guess that's what keeps me in business, right? I mean,
and it sounds like too, I mean, with any type of situation like this, where maybe you don't feel like you were actually a victim of the case. I mean, like the hepatitis, for example, we were talking about, even if you aren't showing symptoms, even if you aren't having issues with your ankle or knee implant, it's still good to get it checked out because it might be building up and it's just not there yet. Like you just haven't noticed it quite yet.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of comes back to maybe just another rule of thumb, kind of like for your friend with the 7 years. If you're going to get a artificial joint, I mean, it's a big deal. And, ask your physician or your surgeon, how long has this product been out? How many patients have you implanted with this? That sort of thing. Because, there'll be these brand new products. Oh, this is like new and exciting and better. And sometimes the surgeons jump on board with that. And they're like, oh, you're lucky. You're going to be one of the first people to get this fancy new thing. Well, you might not be so lucky because that fancy new thing, you might be the one testing it. I mean, you're basically the guinea pig sometimes. And so with those as well, I'm not wanting the brand new thing.
Yeah. And on that point, I think that it can be really difficult and almost intimidating to question doctors. As much as like for us here to be sitting here and be like, ask these questions, do this. Yeah. I know, when you're in that office and when you're being kind of presented these ideas, a lot of information, a lot of big words are being thrown at you.
It's scary stuff.
It's scary. And already, the situation you're in, getting a joint replaced, it is a terrifying thing. And it's something that I know if I was in that position, I would want to kind of just take a step back and be like, my doctor, take care of me, just do what you got to do. But unfortunately, sometimes that's just not the best.
Yeah. Well, and because the doctors don't necessarily, I mean, they're not going to, well, I would hope they're not going to implant something where they think that they're going to have to then go and do a revision surgery. I know when I was going through like the striker ones, it was a very, very difficult revision surgery because they actually had to take out the femoral stem rather than just the actual, the hip joint. And I mean, the doctors were just devastated by this. I mean, again, it's one of those surgeries where, wow, you fix the person and they're so happy and it's great. And then they're coming back and they're worse than they were. Yeah. And now you have to do another surgery, and it's a more difficult recuperation. And I mean, they were very upset and very apologetic and just super frustrated with the whole situation. So, again, they certainly didn't have that information, or they would not have used those implants. So I would definitely recommend. I mean, it is a lot of information. But, ask your doctor, what do you know about these implants? How long have you been, how long have you used these? Again, it sounds kind of funny with the 7 years, but probably 5 to 7 years. I mean, with a lot of like the metal on metal, you would see the problems. So, again, just make sure that the product's been out there for a while. It's been tested by other people, not just you.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And I can't even imagine for these doctors. It must be so awful, right? Like they're coming into this business trying to help people and having to, for something that, you weren't told anything, right? You were almost kept in the dark, and having to have this face-to-face conversation, I just can't even imagine.
Yeah. But I mean, maybe take a break, and it's not like you have to make all your decisions right that 1 second. Take
That's
time
true.
to, maybe, I mean, a lot of people before a big procedure, they say, let me get back to you in, the next few days, the next week or something, do a little bit of research.
Yeah.
But again, it's a great surgery for most people. If it's a good product, wow, I mean, life-changing.
Yeah. And I think, you kind of mentioned this before, as well as you've had people, even with cases that you haven't covered, they might have heard something, or maybe, they've heard that there's hip replacement issues and they don't know what they've had. It's always good to at least go and ask and kind of reach out and see what's going on with whatever product or drug you might be using.
Oh, absolutely. And, back when we were doing some advertising for various hips, I mean, people would call and say, hey, I don't have that particular hip, but I do have this type. Have you heard of problems with them? Absolutely reach out. I mean, we're happy to provide any information that we have on the products. There may be litigation out there. There may not be. It may be something, maybe a malpractice issue. It may be with the way that the product was implanted. Again, if you're having problems, I mean, feel free to reach out, and we're always happy to, if it's something we don't handle, we can help you find somebody who does. Because as we always say, we've been around in this business for a while. And so, we know who's out there, and we're happy to help you find the right place.
And I know, some people might not be in the Tucson area. They're not be able to come in and ask questions. And obviously, we're not going to ask to post in the comments all the drugs and devices you've had implemented. But, we do have Facebook. We do, Facebook Messenger. You can throw us messages there. You can send us an email. I mean, even if you just want to send over your list of drugs or devices that you have, and just to double check to see if there has been any issues or there's any issues at the moment, I think we're more than happy to kind of go through and.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We do it for friends and family, so we can also do it for our pod squad. Right?
I'd say they're friends and family at this point.
Hey, absolutely. They've heard some tales at this point. Gotten to know us a little bit, I suspect.
Yeah, and I know we are kind of coming to a close here on the show. I wanted to see if you have any closing topics or maybe some sneak peeks for what we're going to hear next week.
Sneak peeks. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be exciting as, this Brazilian butt lift and CoolSculpting. But so next week, I'd like to talk a little bit about hernia mesh. This has been going on for a long time, and there are some settlements happening, but there are some products that the settlements have not happened yet, but time is kind of the essence at this point. And so I think a lot of people maybe know about that, but I'd like to just dive into that a little bit more detail next week, and hopefully have some good juicy questions from our listeners to address as well.
Yeah, I know hernia mesh, like you said, has been going on for a long time, and is one of those cases that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to just how severe some of these complications can be.
I actually think when you were in college and you came and met me when I was at a meeting up in Scottsdale about the hernia mesh.
Probably.
Yeah, that was quite a while ago. I think that was at the very beginning. Mm-hmm. So we're probably talking a good maybe 5-6 years ago.
It's crazy. It's
Yeah.
been a while.
So a lot's happened. So we're not going to cover everything in our 20-minute discussion of it, but definitely give some updates and happy to answer any questions on it.
Yeah, and speaking of questions, I mean, if anyone has any questions, feel free to throw it in the comments. I mean, should throw us a DM in Facebook if you don't want everyone seeing it, or email, whatever it may be. But so far, I mean, it's been awesome kind of seeing the interaction that we've had and having people even just reach out individually to me and kind of talk about some thoughts that they had or some ideas that they had as well for the podcast.
Absolutely. It's been fun.
It's been fun. Well, we'll be back next week. Thank you everyone for tuning in.
Thank you.
With that being said, have a great weekend. Prioritizing profits.
Dangerous drug and product cases.